Snow Treasures. Let's keep reading, just because we can, and it's a really good book. I'm going to start in chapter 11 and 12 today. So chapter 11. The blood rushed out of Peter's head. He was certainly dizzy. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was looking up at the slope and the heels of the last row of German goose-steppers. Michael and the girls joined him on the bank. Well, what do you know about that? Michael was open-eyed with wonder. He turned his whole company aside. Lovisa found it equally hard to believe. Peter sat up. If he hadn't, I would have plowed right into them. I might have broken my sled, and the bricks would have spilled, maybe. At least that could have happened. Would have... I'm having trouble reading. Let me try that again. The least that could have happened would have been to make them angry, Helga spoke thoughtfully. We've been lucky, I guess, Peter admitted. I told you there was nothing to be afraid of, Helga shook her curls. And when they turned out like that for you, they can't be so terrible. Come on, we've got to get to the snake. There were more German soldiers to pass before they could make the bend into the farther fjord they called the Snake. To these they would likewise have to come close. Nearest were the sentries that patrolled between the stacked rifles and the road down from the mountains. The sleds would pass within a few feet of where they walked. If Uncle Victor wants them to see us today, he gets what he wants, Lovisa pointed out. They'd have to be blind to miss us. Uncle Victor didn't know that it would be as bad as this, Peter grumbled. He didn't say they'd be marching on the road. Well, we've got past them, didn't we? Come on, Peter, let me go first, Helga begged. It would look even less suspicious if a girl went first. But Peter was the head of the defense club, and it was for him to lead them wherever they had to go, no matter what would happen. He must go first. But he was still frightened enough to want Helga to take the lead. On their sleds again, and the last mile before they would turn the bend by the cliff that hid the entrance to the Snake, the sentries were taking off their stiff-kneed walks beside the rifles. The other Germans went on with their work of unloading the supplies, and nobody so much as looked at the children on their sleds. What if the sentries were to stop them? Peter asked himself. What if they wouldn't let them pass? The captain had been friendly because he himself used to like to toboggan, and anyway, it was not his job to be on watch as it was these guards. But when he went directly in front of the first sentry, he saw only a blank face. There was not so much as a look to show if he was pleased or displeased. Beyond the sentry, Peter saw some soldiers dragging a heavy tarpaulin over the snow, and one of them looked in his direction. Under the round cap and fringe of yellow, I'm going to show you this picture. Hair, he saw the bluest eyes he had ever seen in his life. They seemed to say that he, too, would like to be in a sled riding. Another sentry was stepping up the line over the churned snow, and beyond him another, and like the first one, they had only blank looks to give the children. None of them so much as lifted a finger to stop them. So they were going to be allowed to go on. Uncle Victor had been right when he had said that no one would suspect boys and girls on their sleds. Peter breathed a sigh of relief and dug his heels into the snow for a fresh start. The cliff that hid the Snake was just ahead. Beyond it, they would be safe from curious eyes. That day, anyway, would be won. The sleds would have to be dragged the rest of the way as the ground was level, but it wasn't far to go after the cliff was passed, and there only remained to find 2 fallen trees and to bury the gold and build the snowman. In the Snake, Peter stopped to get his breath. His sled was terribly, terribly heavy. He hadn't noticed how heavy it was when he had pulled it through the woods from the cave, and now it was a fearful load. The others were close on his heels, and they too seemed tired. Even Helga crept along, dragging her crushing load of gold. But where's Uncle Victor's boat? Peter searched both sides of the stream with his eyes. There was no boat on the black water. The trees! Lovisa's eyes fell on a flat stretch that was closed in at 2 ends by long ridges of snow. Here's one of them. She poked her arm up to the elbow into the white-crusted snow, and then she ran right through the deep, untrodden stretch. And here, she called, is the other. The 4 of them began burrowing in the snow. 4 pits were made, and into each went the brown-covered bricks. Then 4 snowmen rose over the bricks. Each stood guard over a mound of gold worth more than 80,000 kroner, $20,000. So between the trees, $80,000 in gold bullion lay buried in the snow. We've done it, Peter exulted. We passed them, and they never guessed. Dumb, stupid things. Helga's lip curled in scorn. We did it! Lovisa thumped Helga on the back and then threw her arms around Peter. And now none of them was tired. They pounded one another's backs and shoulders. They joined hands and circled round and round Peter's snowman. And the captain turned aside his troops because he didn't want to spoil our sled track, Helga burst out laughing. Oh, if he only knew. Tears ran out of her eyes. Weak from laughter, she could no longer stand and fell helplessly in the snow. In roars, the other children fell down beside her. He said when he was a boy there was nothing he liked better than sledding. Peter choked with mirth. He liked sledding, and so do we. Oh, if he only knew. Chapter 12. Peter would have liked to tell Uncle Victor about the events of that day, but Uncle Victor and his boat were nowhere to be seen. It was strange, for Peter knew the Clang Pearson was somewhere in the Snake, but look where he would, all he could see was the black rushing water, the bobbing ice cakes, and the snow that covered ground and trees alike. It was getting late. They had to get to the Holmeses' farm before the blackout. It was 3 miles up the road from the beach, and they would have to hurry. It was twilight by the time the little band turned into the farmyard. Here they were on familiar ground. They passed the German sentries a second time. Again they saw the friendly captain who had turned aside his soldiers. He was returning with his troops, and he greeted them. "Did you have a good sled ride?" he asked in excellent Norwegian. Peter was sorry he wasn't allowed to answer. At the farm kitchen, Michael pounded on the door. "Who is it?" a frightened voice called out. When Michael gave their names, there was a scuffle inside. They had to be recognized before the door would be opened. "But come in," the farm wife called, and Peter thought that for all the sadness of that terrible day, there was still a cheerfulness about the good brown face, and that they had succeeded in carrying the gold past the Nazi sentries seemed to bring hope for Norway. "You had no trouble?" Her husband came out of a dim corner. Their supper was even now being dished into great earthenware bowls, and Peter thought he had never smelled anything so good, nor had he seen anything for a long time as pleasant as the flickering dancing light from the fire and from the candles on the dresser and great long kitchen table. "First they eat, Papa, then they talk," Frau Holm had sent her servant, and who bustled back and forth between the fire and the table. "Draw up now and eat, you brave children, you must be famished." Great steaming dishes dotted with a red and white checkered cloth, meat, potatoes, dumplings, cabbage, all on the table, were also many cold foods, dried herrings, pickled eggs, mackerel, and great round sheets of hard knackebrod, also huge mounds of iced cookies. The children fell upon the food like puppies around the basin of milk. It disappeared like snow when brought into the house, and Frau Holm and Marie, the servant, were kept busy walking back and forth between the table and the stove, refilling the bowls. Herr Holm sat in a rocking chair, his pipe between his teeth. "So you got through all right?" The rough old farmer could not wait to hear their story. "Papa, let them eat," his wife kept urging. "When Marie and I are washing up, you shall hear." Ja, eat your fill," he rocked contentedly. "It's wonderful that we have boys and girls like these who can trick the Germans and not get caught," he chuckled. "Shh, Papa, spies everywhere," Frau Holm continued. "Could be even here." Peter drew a long sigh of satisfaction. Never before had he felt so content. The warm food sent a glow to every part of his body. "We fooled them all right," he boasted. "They even turned out of our way. The captain said they didn't want to spoil our sledding." With that, the 4 of them went into spasms of laughter. The tears rolled down Lovisa's face. Michael had to hold his stomach after all that food. "But what is so funny?" their host inquired. "Tell us so we can laugh too. You fooled them, but what is funny?" The 4 of them started talking at once, but they kept interrupting themselves to laugh. They started to tell of Peter's ride down the mountain, head on into the path of the German Army Corps, and then they all had to stop because they were choking. So it was some time before poor Herr Holm could make out what had happened. But when he learned of the politeness of the captain, whose only fear was that he might spoil their sled track, he too shouted with laughter. They told him all that had happened, even to Lovisa finding the fallen trees. "But Uncle Victor's boat, it's not there." Peter was serious. "You find the trees, but not the boat," Herr Holm chided. "That's because your uncle wishes it so." "You mean he sailed away?" Nah. In the last war, things were hidden by what was called camouflage. What it is called today, I do not know. You cover well with branches of trees or with snow or whatever. Even from the air, you couldn't tell." Herr Holm would have kept the children talking all night if his wife had let him. "To bed with him! Their eyes are buttoned with sleep." Peter remembered being led from the house to the barn, but was aware of nothing else. The next thing he knew, it was morning. "Wake up, my little soldiers," the farmer was saying. "Hours ago I came by and did my milking, and you heard not a sound." Peter was grumpy at being aroused. "Oh, I'm sure that never happens to you." "But would you sleep till noon?" Herr Holm asked in surprise. "You have work to do," Peter murmured. "Why do we have to be in such a hurry? We can get past those sentries any time." "Ja, if the snow holds," Herr Holm spoke anxiously. In alarm, Peter jumped up. "If the snow holds!" And chapter 13 will happen tomorrow. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye.